I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa. Fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We are back after a little midsummer break, and you guys are probably super excited. We're here talking football because there isn't a lot going on in the NFL right now, as mini camps wrapped up, and we still have about a month until training camps begin in earnest. This is usually the quietest period of the NFL, unless you're daily following Travis Kelce's travels as he takes part in the Eras Tour in Europe. There isn't a whole lot of NFL news to report. There is one big news item we'll cover from the last week, but we're excited to be back moving forward with a big division in the NFC North. Dennis, how did you enjoy your week off?
You know, the boy had a couple shows. The other boy had a couple baseball games. It was, I will say it was kind of nice to not have the pressure of not prepping for a show we're going to do. And, work was stressful. Friday was probably my worst day in 8.5 years. So I made a colossal error and, I'm still recovering, but, mistakes happen. But other than that, things are good. I'm still working on trying to patch the hole in the swimming pool and, because my wife loves the swimming pool and I love my wife.
It's like 98 degrees here, which, I'm used to now because we chose the middle of June to go to New Orleans and to go on a Caribbean cruise where, we launched into the Gulf of Mexico at just the right time to meet a young, burgeoning tropical storm that would soon become Hurricane Alberto when it hit Texas.
Alberto,
my mom said I should tell people I knew Alberto before he was famous, which is somewhat true. We spent 3 days rocking and rolling. Our first port got canceled. Our second port, they couldn't do any sea excursions. We did get off at Cozumel where it was 85 and 95% humidity, which is like a warm hug you can't escape. Coming from Colorado, where it's typically 2% humidity, was quite a depressing change. You look at the weather app and it's like air temperature 89, real feel 110. Hope you survive.
That's like, you're walking down the street and two big guys just walked out of the gym all sweaty and started hugging you.
I mean, that is how it feels. New Orleans, the first day we got back off the boat, they had a storm blowing through and there was a lot of cloud cover and there was a lot of strong wind and it was actually decently pleasant. I think it was probably still like 50% humidity. But the second day off the boat, I got land sickness, which I guess happened to a whole bunch of people on our ship because of how hard your inner ear works to keep you upright while you're going through massive waves and massive wakes. And so I was feeling sick and it was in the 90s and the humidity had to have been in the 70s most of the day in the afternoon. I just looked at my wife in the middle of the day. I'm like, we need to go home or I'm going to throw up all over this mall. I need to go lay in the dark in air conditioning to recover. But we had some fun times, saw some really cool stuff. The museum exhibit dedicated to Hurricane Katrina and to the history of Mardi Gras was really fun. Saw the old cathedral. I went to the original De Mons, had cafe au lait and some beignets. That was pretty exciting. We went on a haunted history carriage tour. Even though it was like 10 at night, it was still real feel like 92. We went on a jazz riverboat cruise, which actually ended up being good, balanced out my land sickness and took it away for a little bit. I got some beautiful pictures. You know, I've always wanted to see New Orleans. It was a kick to go there, but I will not miss the humidity.
Just to get below sea level.
Yeah, that's true. But back up here at altitude, you know, another group that is adjusting to life at altitude is the Detroit Lions. We will be looking at them today. They are the first of our teams. They were the winners of the North last year. And we'll also be looking at the Green Bay Packers. But before that, Dennis, there was one piece of interesting news. The Patriots have quietly extended a few players this offseason. They did the same with Ramondre Stevenson, 4 years, I think like $36 million.
17 guaranteed.
Yeah, more interested though in the 4 years. He's kind of going into a contract year. Was a little bit of a rough year with the injury last year. New ownership. If you're holding him in dynasty, you have to feel a greater sense of security now, right?
Yeah, you know, Antonio Gibson, I don't think is a real threat to his volume.
If he wasn't a threat to Brian Robinson Jr., he's.
So, and they don't have a great passing game. We'll see how Drake May develops. Are they going to invest in the offensive line and get that built up? I think if I'm a Ramondre Stevenson manager, it's like that hashtag 2 to 3 year window just got, you know, Pella showed up and gave you some brand new blinds or some shit. You got an extra year on it. I think this bodes well for probably 2 years. I think most of the guaranteed money will be gone after the first 2 years. And if he plays well, you know, they'll keep him around for the third year. And if he doesn't, you know, they'll either boot him to the curb or negotiate him down. You know, Stevenson is a good all-around back. He's got good size, can catch the ball well. I think, you know, he'll split the receiving role, but I think he'll be the primary ball carrier. He did wear down his rookie season, and I think we see a lot of that with rookies in general. The NFL season is just a lot longer, and that grind can get there. It was funny, you know, speaking of the grind, I realized this has been like 6 years I've been with Dynasty Nerds, and 5 years we've been doing this podcast, and you know, we've been grinding. You know, you on top of the fantasy football, you and your movie critiquing career, you know, watching 7,000 movies a year and writing them up on top of all this football.
And sometimes you have to read the books to like get, you know, look at how thick this book is. I started on vacation, but oh my God, you know.
So, but back to Ramondre, I think it feels, you know, he feels like a top 18 running back pretty comfortably. Yeah. And I think if the offense takes a step under this first year coaching staff, if they can get their shit together and stuff, it could be closer to RB1 than RB2.
You know, I agree. I think Ramondre is probably their best offensive player.
Pop Douglas was their most explosive, according to reports.
So ESPN, just to really pour salt in the wounds, had a ranking with Pro Football Outsiders of rosters from 1 to 32 in the NFL. Which team do you think came out as the 32nd best roster in the NFL?
Patriots?
New York Giants.
Oh.
But who do you think was 31st?
Patriots?
The Denver Broncos. Oh. Patriots were like...
I thought we were still talking about Ramondre Stevenson.
No.
That's not how you set me up, man. You're supposed to Patriots start.
No, but that was the surprising when I was scrolling. I scrolled from top to bottom, and when I got to the Patriots at number 26, I was like, oh, this is going to be bad for me. Either 26 or 27. So, yeah, poor Giants, and then poor my fandom. You know, someone whose fandom is not having a hard time is you. You have been on the One Pride bandwagon for...
I've earned it. I have earned it.
And last year, the Detroit Lions Finished 12-5, first in the NFC North. They lost a heartbreaking NFC Championship game to the 49ers. This offseason, wide receiver Josh Reynolds left to go to the Broncos. Bad choice by him. Cam Sutton, the corner, was released, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, the safety, left and went turned to the Eagles. The Lions did add Kevin Zeitler, a guard, DJ Reader at defensive tackle, Marcus Davenport at defensive end. In the draft, they hammered the cornerback position, grabbing Terrion Arnold and Enos Rakestraw Jr. as their top 2 picks. They really were able to focus on defense and free agency and in the draft because their offense is pretty darn good. Last year, Jared Goff finished as QB7, just got a monster extension. Jahmyr Gibbs, as a rookie, was RB10, while David Montgomery was RB17 in his first year with the team. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who also signed a monster extension, finished as wide receiver 3. And Sam Laporta, as a rookie, was tight end 1. Dennis, I would think you want all 5 of those guys for sure in fantasy and are probably near every week starts. Maybe Goff, you watch the home road splits a little bit. But is there anyone else you're keeping your eye on?
It's a tough spot because Khalif Raymond, can you say best ball late round? Maybe Donovan Peoples-Jones can step up, but even if he does, he's replacing Khalif Raymond, and that is, again, a best ball. He's not somebody you want to start. I agree with you. Goff he's a near every week starter. I think you got to take your lumps a little bit. If you're in a 1 QB league, you probably can stream somebody. In a super flex, you're rolling him out there even when he's on the road. The depth they have at tight end, it isn't going to push Sam Laporta. You'll have the occasional Brock Wright or James Mitchell touchdown. It's really going to roll around those 5 guys. And the one that makes me the most nervous is probably David Montgomery. In part because he's such a damn nice guy. Like, there were times last year where Gibbs would be getting the ball down into the red zone and they're all expecting Gibbs to come out and Campbell would go to send in Montgomery and he'd wave him off and keep Gibbs in there. It's like, you earned it, young man. Now, I think Montgomery still scored 12 touchdowns or something?
Yeah, he had 13. He had 1,000 yards. The difference in carries between them wasn't actually that big. 219 for Montgomery, only played 14 games. Gibbs, 15 games, had 182. The big disparity was in the passing game. 52 receptions on 71 targets for Jahmyr Gibbs, 16 on 24 for David Montgomery.
And with the lack of a solid third wide receiver, it really feels like the receiving game is Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Jamison Williams. Potentially, that may bode well for Montgomery. Is he going to get more than 16? I think he gets into the 25 to 30 reception range. If they're playing Gibbs a little more as a slot, they may go a little more 2 running back sets because of Gibbs's proclivity in the passing game, but you're not reaching for anybody outside of those top 5. I think where they finished, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'd probably, QB7 might be a tad high for Goff. He's probably 9 or 10 is where I'd feel more comfortable with him. Montgomery,
it depends on if some guys come back, because we had a lot of QBs that have traditionally been kind of top 12 guys that, Herbert didn't finish the season, Burrow didn't finish the season, Cousins didn't finish the season.
Well, a lot's going to depend on Jamison Williams' development. We've heard a lot of talk about him this offseason. He makes me nervous. He was great coming out of college, came off the injury, but it's been a slow start to his NFL career, hampered by the gambling issue and the knee injury. But what is he, going into his 3rd year?
That's right. He got suspended last year. I was looking at, he only played 12 games. I was like, he must have been hurt. I forgot about that. He was suspended for 6
gambling, playing DFS or some shit. They've got a solid offensive line. One of the better, probably a top 5, top 6 offensive line. They were in such a position that they didn't have to go out and draft a bunch of guys and insert them into the starting lineup. Most of the people they drafted are playing support backup roles. The only guy they drafted with an eye on starting was Terrion Arnold, and he's slotted in at the right cornerback position. Rakestraw, who was pretty highly regarded, they drafted him in the 2nd round, and he's listed as their cornerback, nickelback, 3rd-string nickelback. So he's their 8th cornerback, being that low. So
is he just going to stand there and sing, "Look at this photograph"?
Maybe.
Every time I do, it makes me laugh.
So they're in a position to take a step. What they really need is Dan Campbell to get his emotions in check. He made a couple coaching guffaws last year, and especially one in their last game of the season. So if he can kind of tighten it up a little bit on his end, he's got players. I like the Lions top end for fantasy. They have lots of options. They should score a lot of points for the NFL. Their defense is improving.
So, I went and did a quick look. Jameson Williams, obviously only 10 starts, saw 42 targets, caught 24 for 354 and 2 touchdowns. He had 2 fewer targets and 11 fewer receptions than Khalif Raymond. You're talking about Raymond being the kind of best ball guy in 17 games. Raymond, 44, saw 35 for 489, only 1 touchdown, which is kind of surprising considering he's a steep ball guy. The interesting one, Josh Reynolds, obviously leaves those targets vacated. He saw 64 targets, which would have made him number 4 in the passing game behind the Amon-Ross, 164 targets, 120 for Laporta, 71 for Gibbs. But 64, caught 40 balls for 608 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was wide receiver 55 last year in PPR, averaged over 8 points a game. The range where he landed, Hollywood Brown was at 52, Wan'Dale Robinson was at 53, Elijah Moore was at 54, Jahan Dotson 56, KJ Osborne 57, Dontavian Wicks 58, Michael Wilson down there at 60, Khalil Shakir at 61. If we saw even that kind of a modest leap, right in, around wide receiver, let's say 48 to 60, right there in that wide receiver 49 to 60, right in that wide receiver 5. I still think Jameson Williams would be a weekly flex consideration, but he's got to stay on the field, and he should have a good opportunity because Reynolds was kind of their de facto number 2 receiver for a while there.
I could see, well, I'm much more comfortable with Williams as my wide receiver 6. I can see him being a wide receiver 4 with wide receiver 3 upside in some weeks. He's fast. They go. He's the deep threat on the team, so he's gonna get some opportunities to make big plays. We've seen him make a couple big plays in his short time on the field. So I don't hate him as a later round pick with some upside potential.
Well, and originally when they drafted him, you have to think they had some hopes that he was going to be the guy for them. So hopefully he can round into something like that. So the Lions, 12-5 last year. They were one really bad half away from actually going to the Super Bowl last year. How are you feeling about them in 2024?
Man, you want to know something crazy? I completely forgot to pull up my things. What was that website again?
It is, I just call it Playoff Predictor. Hold on. It's playoffpredictors.com.
I was like, dang it. I was getting myself ready and I knew I was forgetting something. Hey, they're verifying I'm human.
Oh. So I will say I have them
SSL certificate?
I have them about 12-5 again, winning the North again and making a strong playoff. I will do our final playoff and Super Bowl predictions a little bit closer to the season, but they're my early pick for the Super Bowl in the NFC.
I would love them to make it to the Super Bowl. Let me try another route.
So I usually tend to be a little conservative on these. Sometimes you end up with teams that can win 13 or 14 games, but usually I usually have my division winners in the 11, 12 win range because that's more typical. So I have them 12-5 where they were last year, and I think that the 49ers I think finished 13-4, but pretty much everybody else atop the NFC was right around 12-5.
It didn't save my thing.
You're gonna have to go with your gut.
Yeah, let's go 17 and no. I think they feel like an 11-6 kind of team, 12-5.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still going to be good. They won't be. I think last year the advantage they had going for them is they were a little bit of a surprise, like that opening night win in Kansas City, set up, and I don't think anyone's going to fail to see them coming this year. And that might be true for our second team. The number 2 team in the NFC North last year was also a playoff team, and that was the Green Bay Packers, who I thought were going to struggle mightily, and instead they got it going pretty good in the second half, only finished 9-8, which doesn't sound impressive, but they were on quite a roll making it into the playoffs. They blew out the Cowboys in the wild card round, then lost to the 49ers in the divisional round. So the 49ers taking out both these teams from the North. Key departures, Aaron Jones left and is now with Minnesota. Jonathan Owens, the safety, left. I think he's actually with Chicago. So these guys staying in division. And the other safety, Darnell Savage, also left. I think he went to the Jaguars. Key additions, they got Josh Jacobs from the Raiders at running back, and they picked up safety Xavier McKinney. In the draft, they grabbed another tackle in Jordan Morgan. They grabbed an interesting running back prospect in Marshawn Lloyd, and they grabbed another interesting quarterback prospect in Michael Pratt. Fantasy finishes, Jordan Love, first year as a starter, no problems for him. He finished as QB5 last year. At running back, Aaron Jones was running back 37 last year, missed a good chunk of time. A.J. Dillon, who is back, was running back 42. Josh Jacobs, for comparison, was running back 28 for the Raiders. He also missed quite a few games down the stretch. At receiver, Christian Watson struggled to stay healthy, only finished as wide receiver 68. But Jaden Reed, as a rookie, wide receiver 25. Romeo Doubs had another strong season in his second year, wide receiver 35. And Dontavian Wicks finished as wide receiver 58. At tight end, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave kind of split the season. Both of them injured and out at times, both of them rookies as well. Kraft was tight end 29. Luke Musgrave was tight end 31. Dennis, this was the youngest team in the NFL last year, still really, really young. They don't have any marquee receivers that have more than 2 years of experience. So what are you kind of expecting from the Packers this year? Probably another team that won't sneak up on people in 2024.
So the Achilles, or should I say the hamstring issue, is Christian Watson, and it's not the elephant in the room. People have been talking about it all off season. He's been talking about it. He's been seeing specialists and trying to figure out the imbalance that's causing it, and they've been working. I feel like Watson's going to have a phenomenal year. Jaden Reed was wide receiver 25 last year. I think Christian Watson's the receiver you want to have this year. All things being equal, he's just head and shoulders more talented than all the other wide receivers. They can, Jaden Reed is good, a little bit smaller, maybe not as fast. Romeo Doubs, again, not a super quick guy, but okay size. Dontavian Wicks is good size. They've all stepped up and made plays, and I think they believe in themselves. But Christian Watson is the one with the most talent, the most speed. He's just got to put it together. Can he shake that first pass drop that he had his rookie season and the hamstring and put it all together here in year 3? I think so. He's a guy that I like a lot. Do I think Jaden Reed can put up good numbers? Yeah. I think there's going to be 3 receivers that are worth rostering and probably starting most weeks. Jordan Love, QB5, maybe a little bit rich last year. Some of it probably on the heels of the guys you mentioned when we were talking about the Lions not finishing the season. But I think if I'm in redraft, I want Love over Jared Goff. I just think he provides a little more mobility and upside in that regard. And I think when you have a team with a very broad pass receiving core, I think where you want to bet on is the quarterback. And they do. They've got, we didn't even include Bo Melton, who's their wide receiver 5, who flashed plenty of times last year as well. Excuse me. And then you add Tucker Kraft.
He only caught 16 passes for 218 yards. I think he had one good game.
Yeah, but he flashed and showed some ability when he was called upon. And then you got Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, who seem like they're interchangeable, athletically and gifted enough, good pass catchers. Our friend Matt said if he had to choose, he wanted Tucker Kraft, but then Musgrave went out and got the starting job and looked great. And then you add Josh Jacobs on top of it. Don't get me wrong, I love Aaron Jones, but I think Josh Jacobs is just that workhorse type back. I think A.J. Dillon is going to get relegated to, mop up and give me a break duty. I think Josh Jacobs is good enough in the passing game that he's going to get that, and he's a good enough runner.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if AJ did a healthy scratch on game days because I think Marshawn Lloyd's probably more likely their number 2.
Yeah, I want that to be so. Lloyd is good. We've seen rookie running backs that aren't, the top guys come in and struggle a little bit. Most recently, Tank Bigsby. He had a brutal first year last year. And by all accounts, he had a great training camp last year, and then his season just fell apart. And I saw a blurb by John Shipley earlier today that said, Bigsby hasn't been having as good a camp as he did last year. Now, maybe it'll be like reverse psychology, and he'll go in and have a fantastic regular season.
They haven't even had camp yet, so. OTAs and stuff. I feel like this time of the year, the pronouncements about how good or not good people are a little overblown.
Yeah. So here's my conundrum. Like, Christian Watson is the guy that I believe in, for better or worse.
Which I'm interested that you feel so strongly because I'm 100% the other way. Of those 4 receivers, he's the one that I wouldn't touch in Dynasty. I'd rather have Dontavian Wicks.
In Dynasty, I probably want Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs. But this year, I feel like it's year 3. I think it feels like it's the put it together year, have a great year. It's the Josh Gordon 2014 year. That's what it feels like.
I guess I just believe more strongly in Reed, but last year they didn't have, they had a wide receiver, so he was 25, so they had a wide receiver 3, they had a wide receiver 4, they had 2 wide receiver 3s, and 58. Well, that's wide receiver 5. and 68 would be wide receiver 6. People are enjoying seeing me do math here, but I wouldn't be shocked if they had 2 wide receiver 3s and maybe a wide receiver 4 this year, or maybe one of those guys can break into wide receiver 2. But it feels like they kind of evenly split the ball around. I was looking at the stats. Reed only missed one game. Dubs played them all. Dubs saw 96 targets, 94 for Reed, 58 for Wicks, made 6 starts, 53 for Watson and his 9 starts, 24 for Melton. I think the passing game, I feel, is pretty similar. It is really a coin toss for me with those tight ends. I was looking at their stats. Luke Musgrave started 9 games, saw 46 targets, caught 34 for 552 and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft started 8 games, saw 40 targets, caught 31 for 355 and 2 touchdowns. I don't know who to believe in. If I have either of them, I'm keeping them and waiting to see which one's going to explode, but which one's going to be a better play, but I don't know if I would trust either of them as my number 1 tight end. They feel like your second or third tight end. I think Love will be a great super flex starter. I mean, he could end up being, should be a borderline QB1 again. Running back is where I think that we'll see a bigger jump from what the 2023. I do like Jacobs. I think he's got his contract. He's got a team situation he likes. I expect him to be there for camp and going through, because last year I think he held out until we weren't even sure he was going to be available the first week, and I am not sure they played him a lot the first week, so it wasn't shocking that he kind of wore down, especially after the year he had before. I think he'll be in for a bounce back year. I like him to potentially be an RB1 again.
Yeah, I agree with you on the tight end situation there. It's I'm okay with either one of them as a backup in hopes that one of them goes off. But when you've got that kind of wide receiver core, it's going to make the tight end production inconsistent. Do you think Jacobs has another top 5 running back season in him?
I mean, he could. I think top 5's probably too high for me. I feel more like in the 8 to 12 range, because I think there's plenty of opportunity. The other question, though, is going to be I know they've gone through a little bit of a shift in the offensive line, and how big of a factor in the receiving game is Jacobs, because that big bust-out season in 2022, he was catching a lot of passes. We were making jokes. I was told he couldn't catch passes, and he was catching stuff a lot. But we've seen that sometimes from other backs. That was a place where Aaron Jones used to make a pretty big impact as well as a pass catcher. Jones and Dillon last year combined saw 71 targets, caught 52 passes for 466 yards and a touchdown. So
Jones in 22 had 72 targets, caught 59. In 21, 65, caught 52. In 20, 63, caught 47. In 19, had 68, caught 49. So I don't think between 60 and 75 targets is out of the question for Josh Jacobs.
No, and that's, and if you looked and kind of put together Dillon and Jones's, each of them ran for a little over 600. I think Jacobs could be more of a touchdown threat, and that's where I wonder. Jordan Love ended up with 4 rushing touchdowns last year. He was actually their rushing touchdown leader. Does that change a little bit? But if you combine the rushing totals for Dillon and Jones last year, you get 1,269 yards. I wouldn't be shocked to see that. That's just about 220 carries with them combined, because you had no, I can't do math. That's about 320 carries. It's probably too many. But it wouldn't be shocking to see Jacobs get 280 to 300 100 carries, because that's the kind of team I think Matt LaFleur had wanted to do even when Aaron Rodgers was still there. I just don't think they could last year. I'm not sure he is thrilled that, how many did Jordan Love had to put up 579 attempts last year. I don't know if that's the ideal for LaFleur. It seemed like they were trying to be a more balanced and more run-heavy offense. The last year, guys couldn't stay healthy, or in the case of Dylan,
just was so ineffective.
So Josh Jacobs feels like a good fit in this offense. I think that's going to be good. And that makes me wonder, if Watson stays healthy and is on the field, we could see 3 receivers with 90-something targets. Watson, to me, has the biggest range of outcomes. I will say he could do what you're talking about and catch like 60 passes for 1,400 yards and like 12 touchdowns, because that's when he was a rookie. He caught fire in some of those games and just was taking them to the house. But we could also see him get 90-something targets and end up with like 45 receptions for 600 or 700 yards and a couple of touchdowns. To me, he feels like the guy that has the biggest range of outcomes, probably owing to the fact that he's more of the over-the-top guy. I think Dubs has developed into the possession receiver. Jaden Reed, they do a lot of different things with him. He got some carries last year. I think the 3 of them together, this to me, the Packers feel like a team where the sum of the whole is greater maybe than any of the individual parts. We have other teams where it's very starred, like the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb is the man, and they just hope for table scraps from the rest. What makes the Packers, I think, a great team is they have 5 or 6 guys that could all contribute and kill you at any given time. And together, they were kind of magical last year at times.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting to see if any of them start to separate and latch on to a role. Is if one of them, let's say if 2 of them were to play all 17 games and start all 17 games, do you think that either one of them would get 140 targets?
No, I mean, we saw that in Dubs, though. He did play and start all 17 games. He saw 96 targets, caught 59, 674, 8 touchdowns.
Right, but I'm talking almost 50 more targets.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think anyone gets 140 targets. I think if Watson stays healthy, you would see probably 3 guys with 90, maybe 1 at 100 or a little over. But I think they're going to use a mixture. That's how they were playing when they were on the field too.
Yeah, it could be. I think 140 is a stretch for one of them because they do spread the ball around. But I think going into year 3 for this group, they're going to have to start to somebody's needs to start to separate, whether it's just through Keenan Allen like getting open in the short area, consistency, becoming a target hog, whether it's a Devontae Adams mid-range, always open no matter how tight he's covered kind of separation. I think that when things are growing, the spread the ball everywhere works. But as they mature, I think the cream will rise to the top. And
so if you were going to bet on one of them, you'd bet on Watson. I guess if I was going to bet on one of them, I'd bet on Reed.
I wouldn't bet on Watson for the targets. I'd bet on Watson for the yards and the touchdowns. I think Watson could be second or third in targets, but be significantly higher in yards and touchdowns.
And so Reed is the one I think could step forward and be more of a bigger target magnet. I think Dubs is kind of going to be what he is. He feels to me a lot like that kind of Randall Cobb role, and I think between 85 and 100 targets is probably where he's going to be last year, 96 catching, doing possession type of stuff. It's if you're going to see one of them take a big leap, it probably is going to be either Reed or Watson would be my guess. I would tend to bet on Reed, but you are right. Watson, I mean, we saw him as a rookie. What has he had one game where he caught 4 passes for like 150 yards?
Yeah, he had 8 touchdowns in 9 games or 9 touchdowns in 8 games.
Here, I'll pull up his line from from his rookie year, because he is the one that flashed big. It's, can he stay on the field? Because he only played in 11 games, only started 11 games as a rookie too. But he saw 66 targets, caught 41, 611 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So the big quick strikes are there, and the potential is there.
Yeah.
So Packers last year, they were only 9-8, which doesn't sound like an incredible record, but like I said, they really kind of surged at the end of the season. They won 4 of their last 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. They won 6 of their last 8 to get into the playoffs. How are you feeling about them going into 2024? I don't think they're going to sneak up on people. Chicago might have gotten better. Hard to say about Minnesota. We'll talk about those teams Friday. I think Detroit's still good. There are some better teams in the NFC. How are you feeling about the Packers?
So, if I remember correctly, I think I had them finishing second and making the playoffs as a wild card. They did invest a lot of draft picks in their defense. That was a weakness for them. So bringing in Edger and Cooper and Javon Bullard and the back 7 will definitely help to improve them. They added some young depth on the defensive side of the ball. For them, it's really, I think, going to come down to, can Rasheed Walker hold up replacing the oft-injured David Bakhtiari at left tackle? And will Elgton Jenkins stay healthy at left guard? They've suffered a lot of injuries over the last few years in the offensive line. Like I said, I like them to make the playoffs as a wild card. I don't think they go too deep, in part because they are a young team. They are going to have some things to work on. They'll get a chance to learn how to be a winner. I'm probably in that 10-7, 9-8 range again.
Yeah, I had them. I think they win 10, 11 games. I think they make it playoffs as a wild card as well. I also wanted to circle back. I'm going to give you justice for Bo Melton. He was a big factor in the final 3 games of the season. And in that 3-game stretch, he was wide receiver 14.
Go Bo.
Yeah.
Bo knows.
Bo knows. Maybe you remember, because he probably won some people a championship week, because week 17, he had 22.5 fantasy points. If you dared to start Bo Melton, that was your moment. Well, that will do it for us today. Packers and Lions, the bottom line, we think they're both going to be good again, and they probably both have a group of players, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that you should be rostering in 2024 if you want to win some games. So we'll give that as the kind of the big analysis there.
Get them points out of the North. Well, in Detroit, they're in the dome, so it's not so bad when it gets snowy out. But, got to get them Green Bay points early in the season.
On Friday, we will hit the rest of the North. We will be looking at 2 teams that are both potentially rolling out rookie quarterbacks. The Bears took Caleb Williams. The Vikings took J.J. McCarthy. We will be looking at those teams who have worked on themselves this offseason, so that should be a little bit of fun. But, Dennis, if people are looking for something to fill those long, lonely Wednesday and Thursday nights, what can they do?
Well, since we were off last week, they probably got some catching up to do. So go to your favorite podcast platform, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable, hit that like and subscribe button, get caught up. We started our division previews 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, somewhere in there. And
in June.
Get caught up. Yeah, in June. get caught up with us as we head first into 2024. Next Saturday or this Saturday, I will be up in Cleveland for the live Scott Fishbowl draft. So
I'll be excited to hear about your team.
Dude, you want to know how much research I've done?
I think they, from the tweets I saw too, they've radically changed some of the scoring. So
I've gotten worse every year I've played, and I've done more work. And so this year I'm waiting until the last minute.
I was in the semifinals last year. So close.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm in the live draft. I'm in a sleeper league and instead of MFL. So you have to start a kicker, and you can only start one kicker. And maybe sleeper gets on board with the MFL customization at some point in the future, because they do seem to be fairly responsive. And you got a guy as big as Scott Fish kind of say, we actually migrated the Dynasty Nerds Give Back leagues over to sleeper. So, we filled our orphans that we had. That's a 72 team, 12 division best ball dynasty charity league. We've raised over $7,000 for charity over the past, 3 or 4 years that we've been this will be our 4th season. So we've raised over $7,000 for No Kid Hungry, Disabled American Veterans, and the V Foundation. So
Nice.
that's pretty cool. I haven't tallied up this year's donation yet.
Yeah, we still have some time.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it for us today. Don't melt out there, and we will see you on Friday to talk Bears and Vikings.